So let's create the insert view. So in the views, employee manager folder, I'm going to add another view. And I'll call this one insert. So I'm gonna delete all that. And in the insert, we are inserting a single employee. So our model will be for the employee. Let's create the structure for the page. So this is gonna say insert new employee. And for the insertion, we are using the view bag for the messages. Remember, in our employee manager controller, we have the view bags when we are updating and inserting, but we have the temp data when we are deleting, because temp data is being passed from the delete action into the list action. So in the insert, we are going to use those view bags for our messages. So let's do an h3 tag. And let's style this one. This is going to be for the style message. And the message coming from the view bag. And the property we created for this is message. So we want to display a form with the text boxes and the drop down where the user will insert the information, and then the button that will submit the information into the database. So let's create a form. And the form is belonging to the controller employee manager, and the action for this one is the insert action, and the method that it will trigger is the post method. So once submitted, the post action for the insert will be triggered. Now let's create a table. So this is going to be a table, let's say border 0, and here we will have those TDs with the text boxes. So the first one is going to be for the first name. So let's create a TR, and in it we'll have the TD for the first name. So the class is going to be right, so it aligns to the right. And this is gonna display a label that will simply say first name. So this is gonna be a label, and we'll use the ASP4, so it will bind it to the first name. So that is our property first name that's going to be displayed into the label. And when we go to our employee model, you can see that our display is going to be first space name. If we did not have this, it would simply display first name as one word. So we have the label. Now we'll have a TD for the text box. So that's the input. And the input is of type text. And let's bind this one to the first name. So this is going to be ASP4 first name. And if the first name is invalid, we will have a span where we will display the validation. So we'll display a validation 4, and this is for the first name property validation. And let's specify a class message, and our message in my CSS will simply make this red. So that's our first name. I'm going to copy this whole TR and paste it under, and this is gonna be for the last name. So I'll simply change first name to last name. So this is gonna be last name, and last name. So very simple modification. Then we have the title. So I'm gonna copy that TR again, because once again, it's just a text box with the title. So this is gonna be bound to title, both the label as well as the input and the validation. Then we have the birth date. So I'm gonna copy it one more time, paste it right here, and we'll have the label bound to birth date, and we will bind the input and the validation to birth date property as well. And you know what's next. I'll copy that and paste it here, and this is gonna be for a hire date. So once again, I'll change everything to hire date. And then we'll have the country. Now country is gonna be different because that's a drop down. So let's create a TR, and in it we'll have another TD. I'll style it with class right, just like before, because this is gonna be for the label that's gonna be in front of the drop down. And inside this TD we'll have the label. And let's bind this one to country. And then we will display the dropdown. So let's create another TD, and here we will have the dropdown, so we'll have the select, and the dropdown is going to be bound to the country property, and we'll display the items, so ASP items, that are the countries. That's the list of all countries. So let's have a look at the employee manager controller. Remember, we have the method fill countries that creates this for us. It creates the dropdown, and that passes the dropdown inside a view bag called countries. So we will simply have this view bag in our view for the insert to display the dropdown. So the items are coming from the view bag dot countries. So that is our select. Now inside the select we will specify the option, and the option is that nothing is selected, so our value is going to simply be empty, and we will say please select. So that's gonna be our first option. The user will need to select a country. And after the select, if the user did not select valid country, we'll have a span with the ASP validation for, and this is bound to the country property. And again, we'll have the class message that will display the message in red color. And finally, we have the nodes. So that's another TR. And this is not a text box, this is gonna be a text area because the nodes are larger. We allow up to, I think, 500 characters or so. So let's do a TD and style this one again with the class right. So this is for our label. So inside this TD we'll have the label that is gonna be bound to our nodes property. And then we'll have one more TD, which is gonna be our text area. So let's create a TD, and in it we'll have the text area, and this is gonna be bound again to the nodes, and we'll specify the text area rows and columns. So let's say by default we allow 5 columns, 5 rows, and let's say 40 columns. So this is gonna be columns equals 40. And if the user enters something wrong, like tries to enter too many characters, we'll display an error message in our span. So this is gonna be validation for nodes, and let's style it with the message class. So these are our text boxes, our text area, and the dropdown in our table. And inside the table, we also need to have the button that when clicked will submit this form. So let's create one more TR, and in it we'll have a TD. Let's do the call span for 2, so we can have a nice button there. And let's create the button for the type that is gonna be submit. And let's call this one save. So this is a form for our employee to insert a new employee, but we also want to be able to return back to our home view if the user changes his mind and doesn't want to actually proceed. So let's do some BRs, so we space it out a little, and at the end we'll have a link to our ASP controller for the employee manager, and here we'll go back to the action list. So if the user doesn't want to proceed, clicks this link and we'll go back to the list action. And the link can simply say, or the button will say, back to employee listing. So let's see if this actually works. Let's run this, and let's try to insert a new employee. So here is our form. Now before I actually proceed, I want this birth date and hire date to be of type date instead of just a text box. So I'm not going to proceed yet. I'll go back to my view, and here where we have the birth date, instead of type text, I'll change this to date. And the same for the hire date. Instead of type text, I'll change it to date. So let's try it again. So I'll go to insert, and now you can see we have available this as a date from the calendar. So I'm going to, like I said, enter some information. So I entered my name, my last name. My title is best programmer ever because, that's what I am. My birth date, I wish this was it, but it's not. I'm much older than that. My hire date, and then I selected a country. Currently we only have 2 countries, so I selected one of them where I live. And let's enter some notes, just test for example. Let's click save, and we are redirected back to the same page. You can see the information is still there, and it says employee added successfully. This way we can verify that we entered everything correctly, or we can continue and start adding some new employees if we wanted to. And we can go back to employee listing, and it leads us back to the list. And you can see over here, Pavel was added to my list. So this is working correctly, and next let's do the update view.